Okay, I'm going to start at the second section of 51 here about learning. So, or 51.2 here. So, innate behavior is behavior that is genetic, that has a genetic component, and you don't have to be taught. So in humans, we study about what behaviors are innate and what behaviors are not by studying twins, because twins are the only organism, or humans, I should say, on Earth that are genetically identical and then may or may not have different environments and different experiences and can learn different behavior. And so it allows researchers to compare the relative influence of genetics as well as the environment. And more often, we study also animal behavior, and we do it a little bit differently. Animal studies can be done as well, and we call it a cross-fostering study. Places the young from one species in the care of adults from another species. So they take the organisms from one species away from their parents, give them to parents of a different species, and if those babies still have behaviors from their what species they are, then that must be innate behavior on their genetics, because they're not learning it from their parents, because their parents are that are raising them are of a different species. So we can learn about that. Learning, on the flip side, is the modification of behavior based upon specific experiences, which is why then the twin study works as if the twins have different experiences and learn different behaviors. So research into learning seeks to understand both nature and nurture in shaping learning. Nature referring to the genetics, nurture referring to the rearing or their experiences learning from their parents. So one example of this is imprinting. The establishment of a long-lasting behavioral response to a particular individual or object. Imprinting includes learning and innate components and is generally irreversible. So once the learning happens, you can't unlearn it. It is distinguished from other learning by a sensitive period, meaning that you can only learn it in a particular part of development when you're young, and it could be you have to learn it in a matter of a few days, and if those few days pass, then that sensitive period is done. So it's a limited developmental phase that is the only time when certain behaviors can be learned. So an example of imprinting is young geese following their mother. So they all in a line following their mother. And this man named Konrad Lorenz showed that when baby geese spent the first few hours of their life with him, they imprinted on him as their parent. And so they followed him as if they would their mother. The imprint stimulus he found in the species of geese that he was studying, the gray-legged geese, is a nearby object that's moving away from the young geese. So here's the eggs. So he had the eggs, and the eggs hatched, and whatever object, it's not like they know their mother, so whatever object is near after they hatch in those first few hours, whatever nearby object moves away from them, that's what they say, that's what they imprint on that particular object and recognize that object as the thing to follow. So usually in nature, that object is the mother, and they follow the mother. Well, Konrad Lorenz took these eggs, and the mother wasn't around, and he hatched these eggs, or the eggs hatched, I should say, and he moved away from them. They imprinted on him, and for their young adolescent life, they followed him instead of their mother. And after that sensitive period, they can't unlearn it. So after that sensitive period, even if the mother came around, they would not follow the mother. They would continue following him because they cannot unlearn it, and that's the irreversible part. So that study is very, very interesting in terms of that, of how imprinting works. And this is a picture of Konrad Lorenz right here and the little geese following him. They also have used imprinting to help with saving the whooping crane. So there's a man in this little contraption here. He's dressed up like a whooping crane, and basically they did the same thing where these geese imprinted on him, and they followed him wherever they went, wherever he went, I should say. So he got into this little plane and flew, and they're following him, and so they can dictate where they migrate and so on and so forth. All right, so that's what this last little bit is. Conservation biologists have taken advantage of imprinting in programs to save the whooping crane from extinction. They can imprint on humans in crane suits who then lead crane migrations using ultralight aircraft, and so they follow them through the air. It's kind of cool. All right, some other types of learning: spatial learning and cognitive maps. So learning based upon the spatial structure. So in this case here, we're going to write spatial learning. Is a more complex modification of behavior based on experience with the spatial structure of the environment. So let me give you an example here with digger wasps. They use landmarks, so the spatial arrangement, to find their nest entrances. Digger wasps, their wasps are underneath the ground, hence the name digger wasp. And so let me get a different color here. What I want to point out is here's the entrance to their nest right here. And so, what Nico Tinbergen did, scientist here, did some studies about the learning in the digger wasp, and so he planted and put these pine cones. I shouldn't say planted, put these pine cones around their entrance to their nest, and the digger wasp came back and flew to the nest. Then what he did is here's still the entrance to the nest underneath the ground. He changed the location of those pine cones and watched the behavior of the digger wasp, and they found that they still tried to go to the center of those pine cones, illustrating that the wasps were using the spatial arrangement of their environment in terms of making kind of in their brain a cognitive map of their environment to figure out where and locate the entrance to their nest. And so that is called spatial learning. Another type of learning is associative learning, where you associate one thing with another. So in associative learning, animals associate one feature of their environment with another. For example, a blue jay will avoid eating monarchs, that's a type of butterfly, and similar-looking butterflies after an experience with a distasteful monarch butterfly. And so they have the one experience, and they know what the monarch looks like, and they've eaten it. They didn't like the taste of it, and so then they will not eat it again, or anything that looks similar. Here's a little picture of this. So here's the monarch butterfly. Here he is catching him, eating the monarch butterfly. Oh, he doesn't like it. He is barfing it back up. He doesn't like that, and so therefore, he won't eat anything that looks similar to that again. He has learned. So he associates that bad taste with the pattern and the look of the butterfly, and won't eat anything similar looking, so that he doesn't have that experience again. Another type of associative learning is called classical conditioning. If you've had psychology, this is familiar to you. If not, it's no big deal. Classical conditioning is a type of associative learning in which an arbitrary stimulus is associated with a reward or punishment. So something that has nothing to do, it's just this arbitrary stimulus is associated with a reward or punishment. So whenever that stimulus happens, the organism either gets rewarded or punished, so that then whenever they experience that stimulus, they expect the reward or the punishment. So for example, a dog that repeatedly hears a bell before being fed, so that the bell is the arbitrary stimulus, will salivate in anticipation of the bell sound because he's used to getting the reward of being fed. And so he associates those two things. So that's the arbitrary stimulus associated with a reward or punishment. Another type of associative learning is what's called operant conditioning. in which an animal learns to associate one of its own behaviors. So it's not an arbitrary stimulus. It associates one of its own behaviors with a reward or punishment. So something it itself does. So sometimes this is also called trial and error learning. You do the behavior and either something good happens or something bad happens. And if something good happens, you may repeat that behavior. If something bad happens for that behavior, you may not repeat that behavior. So for example, a rat that is fed after pushing a lever will learn to push the lever in order to receive food. And so that's a behavior. Oh, I pushed the lever. Oh, look at it. Food fell out of here, and it eats it up. That's a reward as a result of that behavior. It didn't know that that behavior was going to get a reward, but so that's why it's sometimes called trial and error learning. But it did get the reward, so therefore it may push the lever again in order to get that same reward. All right, and the same thing would be true also if there was a punishment. It may not do that. Like if they touch the lever and they get a shock or something like that, they may not touch the lever again because that would be kind of like a punishment if it hurt. Okay, moving on with learning. Another type of learning, cognition and problem solving. So cognition, this is kind of higher level. It's a process of knowing that may include awareness of yourself compared to others, reasoning skills, recollection and remembering from the past and applying it to the present, judgment. So for example, honeybees can distinguish same from different. And so let's turn the page and look at an example of that. So I'm going to color code here. Let's see here. What they did, let's get a blue. Let's make, well, green might stick out better. Okay, so let's just explain what this is. All right, so this is a chamber, and this is the bee, and this is the entrance. And so then they enter through this little entryway. All right, and then here they have two different pathways. All right, so this is often called the decision chamber right here, and they can go in this direction or this direction. What you can't see, well, I guess you can. These are dark. So what they did is they did an experiment, made these entrances colored. So this is like different colors. So I'll do green and yellow, let's say. So this one's yellow right here, around here, green and yellow. Now also within this, there's food. So I'm going to make the food pink here. Oh. All right, so what they did is they trained these bees in a chamber like this, where the first entrance, it was green. All right, it goes in, and the first door was green, and then they were given a choice between the same color as the original entrance or a different color. But what they did is they put food into the same color, so therefore, by flying through and going through this door with the same color, they were rewarded with food. And so therefore, the bees learned, all right, where the food was. And then they so that was one set of bees. And then what they did is they did the same thing with they took the same bees and put it into a different chamber. So, but instead of on this side, we can let's write that this was a color maze where the doors were colored. This is a pattern maze over here. So they weren't different colors, but notice here the stripes. So horizontal stripes, vertical stripes, horizontal stripes. So they took those same set of bees that went through this maze and put it into this maze, and guess what? Those bees went through the same, so here's the horizontal stripe, they found the matching horizontal stripes and went through there in anticipation that there would be food. They didn't put food there, but that was the way that those bees flew, showing that they learned from this experience and applied it to a whole new experience, looking for that same reward. And they did the same thing with a different set of bees where they put the food over here in the different colored entryway or doors, and those set of bees, when put into this other choice chamber here, they went to the one that showed a different pattern. So very clearly showing upper level cognition with the with the bees. And interesting, I read about a study back in 2010 where they've done a study where bees can actually also recognize slight differences in human faces as well. Kind of interesting. All right, so this kind of shows a little bit problem solving. And I'm going to some other examples. Problem solving is the process of devising a strategy to overcome an obstacle. So I guess this isn't problem solving. This is the next two examples are chimpanzees can stack boxes in order to reach suspended food. So they've done experiments where they have hung, let's say, a banana from the ceiling of a room and then put some boxes, scattered some boxes around the room and allowed the chimpanzees to be in the room. They found that when the chimpanzee tried to get the banana hanging and it couldn't reach, it was able to analyze, take the boxes, stack them up, get up on top of the boxes to reach the banana. And so that is an example of a problem-solving strategy that chimpanzee used. Another example is with birds, ravens. They hung food from a branch, and when the raven was unable to get the food from flying and not be able to accurately get it into its mouth by flying by, what they found is that raven, here's the branch, it stepped up on the branch, and then there would be the string with the food hanging down below. It would lean down with its beak, take some of the string, pull it up, use its foot to step on the string, go down, pull up more string, use its foot, go down, pull up more string, until eventually the food was up near the branch and it could reach it with its mouth. So clearly another great problem-solving strategy by these ravens. And interesting enough, they've seen that not all ravens could do that. So there is variation among problem-solving strategies and how good of a problem solver you are based upon your experiences and genetics and so on. Same kind of thing as with humans. All right, and so that is learning. And so we have some behaviors that are innate, some that are learned, either taught or by experience. And so natural selection, let's pull in evolution here. Natural selection favors innate and learned behaviors that increase the organism's survival and reproductive fitness. And so foraging is an example of a behavior. It's a food-obtaining behavior, includes recognizing, searching for, capturing, and eating food items. So foraging behavior is a compromise between benefits of nutrition. So there's clearly a benefit for going out and gathering food for energy and so on. But then you have to weigh it against the costs of obtaining food. So what are the costs? The costs of obtaining food include what? The risk, actually I was going ahead of myself, include energy expenditure. So it takes energy to go out and gather food or hunt for food. And the risk, that's the risk part, of being eaten while foraging. So realistically, it's dangerous. You could go out and potentially be hunted by a predator. Natural selection should favor foraging behavior that blank the costs. That should be minimizes. You want to minimize the cost and what the benefits? Maximizes the benefits. So for example, mule deer are more likely to feed in open forested areas where they are less likely to be killed by mountain lions. All right, so therefore they choose where they forage or feed to reduce the cost. And then foraging and bees as well, we talked about that with the waggle dance and so on that we talked about in the first section. Mating behavior and mate choice. Mating behavior includes seeking and attracting mates, choosing among potential mates, competing for mates, and caring for offspring. And so therefore, behaviors that help with those things are favored and increase your reproductive fitness. Parent and offspring interactions. Consider bird species where chicks need a continuous supply of food. A male maximizes his reproductive success by staying with his mate and caring for his chicks. So in those species where those babies need a continuous supply of food, the father may stick around and help with the caring. But then a bird species where chicks are soon able to feed and care for themselves, it's not as necessary. And so a male maximizes his reproductive success in that scenario by seeking additional mates. So he may leave those chicks and go find another mate and have more chicks. And so therefore, depending upon what maximizes the reproductive fitness dictates kind of the behaviors of the organism. And lastly, avoidance behavior. So organisms that, fly or touch an electric fence or eat something that tastes bad like the blue jay will then avoid it in the future. Or they can learn from other organisms that were hurt by those things. And lastly, we've already talked about communication, but organisms exchange information with each other in response to internal and external cues, which then can change behavior. I just want to pull in the fight or flight response. So a physiological reaction that occurs in response to perceived harmful event, attack, or threat to survival. So you come into contact with a bear and your body, remember, has to react. Either you're going to fight or you're going to flee in response to that. Okay? And then lastly, cooperative behavior. Some organisms work with each other, and it increases the fitness of both the individual and the whole population, the survival of the population. So this may be organisms that warn each other that a predator is near. So, for example, young vervet monkeys learn from older monkeys to give and respond to alarm calls for different predators. So those are distinct alarm calls for different predators. So they have one type of alarm call, a loud barking sound if the predator is a leopard, or a short double syllable cough when it's an eagle. So one sees it, gives this call out, then the others start calling out, and therefore this is called cooperative behavior, where it benefits everybody. And then another example of that is pack behavior in animals. So wolves hunt in packs, increasing the chances of killing prey and obtaining food, so they do better working together than they do individually. And that is the end.